In this video, you're going to learn about the arrow function. The arrow function is an alternative way to create a function in JavaScript, and it comes with a special syntax, making it a great candidate for a lot of situations where you have simple one-line functions. Let's go ahead and start by creating a new folder for this section. I'm going to make one right inside of JS Bootcamp, and I'll call this one Advanced. It's not the most advanced stuff we're going to cover, but I couldn't quite think of a better name, so we'll stick with this one for now. In here, we're going to make a single new file, and this will feel familiar. This is what we did before we talked about JavaScript in the browser. We created some scripts and we ran them through Node. We'll be doing the exact same thing in this section, though we will also be integrating what we learn into our applications as a whole. So right here, let's go ahead and knock this out. I'm going to set up a new file. I'll call this one arrow-function.js. And we're going to kick things off by creating our first arrow function. To kick things off, I am still going to be defining some sort of variable. I'll call this const square. We'll create a simple function that just squares a number, multiplying it by itself. And I'm going to set square equal to, now this is where things change. If we were to create a function using what we know now, we would start off with the function keyword, then the arguments list, then the function body. With an arrow function, we actually have a different syntax for defining it. We start off with the arguments list. So right here, I add my two parentheses. Then we move on to what puts the arrow in the name arrow function. This is the equal sign, followed by the greater than sign. And then we wrap up our arrow function definition with our function body in curly braces. So far, all we've really done is we've removed the function keyword from before the arguments list, and we've added the arrow between the arguments list and the function body. Now, we can actually still define arguments just like we can with regular functions. So I could define a single argument num, for example. I could define none if I didn't need any arguments. I could define 6 if I happened to need 6. Now, inside of the function body, we can do something meaningful. Right here, what I'm going to do is return the number times itself. So num times num. So aside from a slightly more concise syntax, we're not really getting any advantage as of now, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and first call this function, and then we'll start to look at the differences between regular functions and arrow functions. Down below, I'm going to just add a console.log so we can see the output. Then I'm going to call square, and I'm going to pass to it 5. 5 times 5 is 25. I return 25 from square, passing it to console.log, so I would expect to see 25 printing when I run the script. Let's go ahead and do just that. I'm going to switch over to the terminal, and I'm going to crack open a third tab. We'll leave both of those servers running, and I am going to cd into the advanced folder we just created. And in there, I'm going to use Node to run arrow-function.js. When I run the file, what do I get? I get 25 printing. So at this point, we have defined an arrow function, but we haven't looked at any clear difference between a regular function or an arrow function. One of the great features of the arrow function is known as its shorthand syntax. This is a very different way to define the function body, and it's something that we can't do with regular functions. What we're about to learn can only be done with arrow functions. To use this shorthand syntax, what we want to do is figure out if a function qualifies for it. We use this shorthand syntax when we have simple functions that have one line that just returns something. So we're going to see this a lot, not just with functions like square, but with all of the functions, all of the callback functions that we pass to our array methods. For example, if I crack open the Notes app and go to the Notes functions file, there's a few situations where we use array methods like notes.findIndex. Here, we have a simple function that just returns something. This is a great use case for what we're about to explore. Same with down below. Down below, near the bottom of the file, we use notes.filter. We have a function that just returns something, another great use case for an arrow function. So what exactly is this shorthand syntax? Well, let's go ahead and start by copying this function and pasting it down below. And I'm just going to change this to square long, just to differentiate the variable name. And what we're going to do is tweak the code we have up above. The first thing we're going to end up doing is actually deleting the curly braces altogether. When we use the arrow function's shorthand syntax, we do not define curly braces. So what goes after this arrow is not the function body, it's actually the expression we want to return. So as I mentioned, we can only use this syntax when we have simple functions that just return something. So in this case, what we put after the arrow is this expression, number times number. There is no curly brace. There is no return statement. So right here, all we have to do is type num times num. And there we have it. We have the exact same function we had down below, but using this shorthand syntax. Now at first, you're going to say, yes, that is indeed shorter. I can count characters, but it's way more confusing. It's a lot harder to read, meaning that it's not ideal. And I understand. When I first saw the arrow function syntax some years ago, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, whoa, we've been doing things with the regular function for a while. I don't really see a need for this. Well, I can promise you that after a few months, I was used to the syntax, and after that, I became addicted, and I very rarely use regular functions anymore. I use arrow functions even if I'm not taking advantage of the shorthand syntax. It's just a nicer way to set things up. So at this point, we know about this shorthand syntax, and I want to bring it into a more real-world example. So let's say we don't have just a function that takes a number and multiplies it by a number. Let's say we have an array, const. I'm going to have an array of people. So const people. Each person is going to be an object, and we're just going to create a couple. I'll have name Andrew for me, age 27, and I'll add a few more into the mix. Name Vikram, and we'll have their age be, let's go ahead and use 31, and then we'll add just one more to keep things interesting right here. Name, I'll go ahead and use Jess, then we have age, and I will use 22. So we have our array of people. Each person has a name and an age. Now let's say we're trying to filter, for example, by people who are under 30. If I wanted to do this, we know we could use the array filter method. Const under 30 equals, I would use people.filter, and I would set up my function. So I can use a regular function for the moment. This is our callback function. It gets called with the individual item. So if this is an array of people, the individual one would be a person. And then we go ahead and actually return something. I'm going to return, and we're just going to check if their age property is less than 30. So right here, is person.age less than 30? If it is, we're going to return true, meaning that item will show up in under 30. If it's false, we're going to return false, meaning that item won't show up in under 30. And we can just go ahead and print the results. Console.log under 30. I'm going to save the file. I'm going to run the script. And what do we get? We get Andrew and Jess. The other person, Vikram, has been excluded because of their age. So this is using the regular function. Let's go ahead and convert this over to using an arrow function. That's going to allow us to knock all of this out in just a single line. I'm going to go ahead and actually create a new variable down below, const under 30. We'll go ahead and remove the duplicates before we save. I am going to set it equal to, we're still going to use people.filter. Nothing changes there. What changes is what we pass into the filter method. We're still passing in a function. There's no way around that. We're just going to use an arrow function. So I'm going to set up my arrow function, just like we learned before, and I'll define my argument right here. It's still person, and then we'll add our function code. So I'll return person.age less than 30. Now we can see we have this simple function. We have a function that just returns some sort of expression. We can actually just take this, cut it out, and use the shorthand syntax. So I can remove the need for the curly braces. And right here, after the arrow, person.age less than 30. This has the exact same functionality as what we have up above. Now, up above, it might be a little easier at first to read the code, but don't worry, after time passes, you will be able to read this just as fast. I'm going to comment out the filter call up above to remove the duplicate under 30 variable. Now we're going to save things and rerun the script to make sure it still works. If I rerun it, right here, what do we have? I have Andrew and Jess with Vikram nowhere to be found. He was still correctly filtered out using our arrow function with the shorthand syntax. So we were able to take what was once 3 lines of code and get it down into a single line. Now, I understand that at first this single line is going to be harder to read and write, but I promise that's just a temporary setback. Once you get used to it, you're going to be able to read and write much faster than you would have with your regular function syntax. Now I want you to use an arrow function with the shorthand syntax on your own. Down below, let's go ahead and set up a quick little challenge. What you're going to do is find the person with age equal to 22. If your ages are different than mine, make sure that the one you search for actually exists. Then down below, you're just going to print that person's name. Now you're going to need to create a function to get that done. I want you to use an arrow function with the shorthand syntax. All right, pause the video, knock that out, come back, then click play. How'd you do? That one should have been pretty easy. I'm going to go ahead and create this right here, const. I'll just call this something generic, person, and I'll set it equal to. And to find the person, I'm going to be using the array find method. So that would be people dot find. And remember, find takes a function, but what we're going to do is use an arrow function. So I'm going to get my arrow function argument set up. This one is going to be a person. And with find, we want to return true when we found our match. So right here, the thing we return is going to be us checking if person.age is equal to the number 22. If it is, we want to consider that a match. We're going to actually set person, and then down below, we can do something with it. In this case, we're just going to print it. So console.log person.name. Excellent. So there we have it. That's all we had to do to complete the challenge. We found the person, creating an arrow function using that shorthand syntax, and we printed their name. If I go ahead and actually save this file and rerun things, what do we get? We get Jess printing, which is indeed correct. She is the first person in the array with an age of 22. So there we have it, a little bit about arrow functions. We're going to be using them throughout the course, and we're going to be using them with this shorthand syntax when we can. Now, I have a bit more to say about arrow functions. There are some other differences, and we're also going to spend some time integrating them into our applications. So let's consider this part 1 of 2. In the next video, we're going to continue focusing on arrow functions. Let's just jump right in.